Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Alistair.
And I'm Nick.
And in this episode, we'll be finally doing our review of the second series of Legion. And after that, we'll be asking, how far can you twist an audience before they snap? But before all of that, Nick, have you been watching, reading, listening to anything interesting recently?
Well, I've been away on holiday. One of the reasons why you got that last-minute mid-year update episode last time rather than a regular episode. Sorry about that, but, we're back. At least you finally got to hear me and Julianne talk about Once Upon a Time. And on the plane to and from, I started reading a comic I've been meaning to read for a while, which is The Unwritten by Mike Carey, who also, of course, writes novels as M.R. Carey, to greater success, but I still like his comics a lot, and drawn by Peter Gross. And this is a comic about a character called Tommy Taylor, who is the son of an author who wrote a fantasy series akin to Harry Potter. It's sort of, there's a certain amount of Harry Potter analoguing going on, although I think it also analogues to a few other well-known children's fantasy series. This character in this children's fantasy series is also called Tommy Taylor, and his dad has mysteriously disappeared, and Tommy Taylor is, he's insisting that people call him Tom Taylor, because he's not actually a boy wizard, but he does make a lot of his living going around on the convention circuit, signing copies of his dad's books. And, weird things start happening, and Tom Taylor starts to wonder if, he might actually be a fictional character, or be somehow a construct or something. It's a very confusing metafictional series, but I'm enjoying it quite a lot. It's basically a sort of conspiracy thriller, to be honest. There's this sort of fiction-based conspiracy about people using stories to control the world, and Tom Taylor may or may not be a major component in this war between shadowy factions. And it's interesting. It's very clever. But Mike Carey has clearly taken a lot of time to try and weave in a lot of fiction and create this whole map of stories that have been weaponized and had their meanings changed. There's a whole two-parter about Nazi propaganda, which was also quite good.
Yeah, it does sound like a very interesting idea for a comic. Is this like a big departure for Mike Carey next to, because he's written X-Men and Constantine, was it? Are these similar?
It's definitely a more literary fiction type thing. It is the sort of thing that probably could be a literary fiction book, but instead it's a comic. But it's his other comic work has been fairly varied, to be honest. There was his most famous work on other people's characters is probably his runs on X-Men and Constantine. But he's had a few. There's a comic he wrote called Suicide Risk, which I think was a cop series, which I've never read. And he has another series which he's actually just started with the same artist as Unwritten, Peter Gross, who's very good, by the way. He's not a very flashy artist, but he's a very solid, evocative one. Everything he draws has a lot of heft, and you never sort of have to stop and wonder what's going on, or you never have to doubt what's happening or what's meant to be real, which is, quite handy in a slightly surreal story like Unwritten.
Yeah, it does sound like an interesting idea for a comic.
It ran for about 60 issues in the, I think, late 2000s, early 2010s. It's one of these things I've been meaning to read for a while, but the right Comixology sale finally came along and I was able to just grab the whole thing. And now I'm going to finally plough my way through it.
Sounds good.
If you're an M.R. Carey fan, and this is probably the one of his comics that would appeal most to you if you want to try a comic by Mike Carey, having read The Girl with All the Gifts or one of his other novels, The Unwritten is probably a very good place to start. That's my take. Alistair, what have you written, read, seen?
I've been watching Sacha Baron Cohen's new TV show, Who is America?
Oh, yes, okay.
Yeah, obviously it's political satire. It's kind of Sacha Baron Cohen going back to his sort of earlier works. He's done a few narrative fiction films recently, just called straight-up comedies, such as, I think, The Dictator and Grimsby, neither of which I think were particularly well received. But now he's gone back to the sort of what he was doing with, his original popular characters, like Ali Chi and Borat, by basically, creating these characters and then interviewing real people and trying to get them to say silly things, like Brass Eye. Well, this one's in America, and he's created, 4 new characters, and the premise of each episode is you get a bit from each character, usually them meeting someone, supposedly for filming a documentary, and then the character acts ridiculously and it tries to get the person who's been duped to do something ridiculous. Some of the characters work really well. There's some quite good satire. I think some of the characters aren't as good as the others. One of the characters is a colonel in the Israeli military. He sort of goes around speaking to Republicans and NRA supporters, trying to get guns into the hands of kind of 4-year-olds. And it's quite terrifying, how many Republicans are willing to be like, yes, of course, it's a brilliant idea to give like small children guns. Yeah, the younger the better. That character worked well because it was, I don't know, driving people to, I don't know, be ridiculous or exposing an actual sort of political undercurrent in America. Some of the other characters I didn't think work as well. There's another one who's an ex-convict who's now trying to be an artist, talking to people in sort of the art world. And I don't think that worked as well because if you get people in the art world to say sort of feces is art and also then say something pretentious about it, that doesn't seem like particularly biting satire, because I don't know what it reveals that like there are pretentious people in the art world. That's not really a newsflash.
True. Yeah, I haven't actually watched that yet. It came out while I was on holiday, and I haven't really caught up on my media consumption in any way since returning from the holiday. It did sound interesting, obviously mostly because I think everyone assumed that Sacha Baron Cohen would no longer be able to do that sort of thing now that he's an actual celebrity.
Yeah.
But it turns out if he slaps on enough prosthetics, he can still get away with it.
There's quite a lot of makeup and things like that for these characters. Yeah, I guess because he's a lot more famous now, yeah. Unlike Ali G, which was, I guess, just him wearing, like, sunglasses and an anorak. But this seems to work.
I don't know, I was always a bit unsure what the point of Ali G was once it became clear that everyone he interviewed knew it was just a comedian doing a bit.
Yeah.
Like, I thought the entire joke, to an extent, is meant to be that people think he's an actual youth TV presenter. You know, and this is a serious representation of the youth, and therefore they should try and engage with it as the youth. Once everyone knows it's just a dude doing a character, I struggle to see why that character still exists. So, yeah, I think, obviously, if he's going to do this again, actually going back and doing it in a way that, you know, it hasn't already been on, it hasn't been heavily advertised, people don't know that he's doing this, and therefore it actually works again.
Yeah. I think they obviously, by the point when people really recognise and know the character, that's the point which should be retired, which I think that's only why he's not going back to Ali G or Borat now. And also, I guess, sort of relocating to America. I mean, he's done shows in America before, like there was a Borat series in America, and obviously the films are set there. But I don't know, I guess there's something about the current political climate and the sort of like incredibly high running emotions and very aggressive posturing that kind of really lends itself to being satirized in sort of the way that Sacha Baron Cohen's very good at. Like I say, like talking to gun rights activists and trying to get them to say the most like ridiculous things about guns. There's something about it, I know, really kind of reveals something about how people think or how far they're willing to go.
Yeah, it always seems similar to what, you know, the thick of it writers always say when someone goes, why don't you bring back the thick of it? You know, people are willing to say and do such ridiculous things already, and no one seems to really mind. But almost what's the point of going out and driving it into satire? But I should probably actually watch the show just to see how, if Ali G, no, that's not his real name. If Sacha Baron Cohen could actually get people to say something so ridiculous that it still seems ridiculous even now.
Yeah, well, I think certainly with some characters, like I say, but other characters I don't think it worked as well. There's another character that's a lecturer in gender studies, and I don't know, he just kind of, this enormous like parody of what like kind of liberal American sort of college professors are like, and it works quite well as a character, but it's mainly basically like I can't believe that the conservatives that he meets when he's doing this character actually believe that he thinks the stuff he says he thinks. Everything he says is just such a parody of what conservatives think liberal Americans are like. I'm just shocked that people actually don't say, no, this is clearly a joke, you're winding me up. But I guess it says something about how divided America is that they are willing to believe the most ridiculous things that he comes out with.
I just think if he's successful enough, there might be a phenomenon of American politicians trying to rip their interviewers' faces off to prove that they're secretly Sacha Baron Cohen.
Oh dear. Well, like I say, I wouldn't rule it out.
Would the series have to be cancelled once the first cheekbone gets wrenched off out of fear of it?
Probably, yeah.
No, never mind. Hopefully we'll get some good episodes out before that happens. Okay, and our main review item this fortnight. At long last, after not one but two failed attempts, third time lucky, we should manage it now as long as there's not a power cut. It's our coverage of the second season of Legion. This, of course, is the Marvel Fox X-Men TV show featuring David Haller, a character who has both gigantic telepathic powers and a lingering mental illness, who is trying to both manage all that and deal with his latest showdown with his terrifying nemesis, the Shadow King, who until recently, basically until the end of season 1, was living in his head and has only recently sort of emerged. the second season, and things are getting dark, as they say. So we've seen the whole thing, and we're going to talk about it. I think there's probably two slight admin points to raise before we get onto that. Number one, this is one of those seasons of TV where, in order to talk about it in any meaningful way, especially considering we've covered it before, we're probably going to need to blow the twist at the very, very end of the show. So, spoilers, maximum spoilers, all the way up to the last shot of the last episode. If you don't want that, if you're planning on watching Legion Season 2 unspoilt, then this is your moment. Turn off, run away, bye. And also, sort of relatedly, content warning, I suppose, and the nature of this content warning is also a spoiler, so again, run if you want to. There is a beat in this season, again, as part of the final episode, where a character is very possibly sexually assaulted, or at the very least, there is some sexual activity which is probably not entirely consensual due to a brainwashing element. I don't think we're going to need to, really litigate it in depth, because the show is fairly upfront in dialogue about how this is clearly not fully consensual and therefore clearly bad, but we're probably going to have to at least mention it. So if you don't want to hear us talk about that, then again, nice seeing you. Yeah, I think that's it. Okay, so all that out the way. Alistair, Legion Season 2, how was it?
I really liked it. I think whilst I was talking to someone about this show recently, I said it. I think it's the best thing that's on TV. Yeah, it's just really, really interesting, original. It's got a very distinct sort of visual style, which is quite different to any other TV show that's on right now. It's certainly unique. What I like the most about it is the sort of slightly abstract, slightly surreal way that the show is made. It does a really good job of showing the sort of the inner thoughts of the characters. Obviously, this is a show about psychic characters, and you're sort of reading people's minds and going inside people's minds. So it's quite clever how they use this sort of slightly abstract visual style to represent the inside of people's heads.
Yeah, I think, as I've said before about Legion, I like the fact that it's managed to do this sort of, the telepathy thing, which has always been part of sort of X-Men mythology, the sort of mind-reading, going inside people's minds, but a bit too often it basically just becomes walking through empty hallways and then blasting telepathic zaps at them. And Legion is clearly trying to go, no, okay, these are states of mind, these are people's emotional states. How can we actually visualise that in a more interesting way? And yes, I think that is the one thing it definitely succeeds in doing, being a sort of a thoughtful, occasionally slightly ponderous show about these mental health issues and this state of mind. And in this second season specifically, as I vaguely said a few seconds ago, they're very much going for the, I don't know, it seems very dark Empire Strikes Back, middle of trilogy stuff. The first season had a certain sense of sort of boppy superhero fun to it, alongside the real psychological talk. This felt quite depressing. At times, it was quite sort of oppressive. There was lots of dark things happening in dark corridors. Yeah, I'm gonna, skirt around the ending for a few more minutes, but just in general, it definitely feels very raw. Everyone feels quite sad. There's a definite sense that whenever anyone does anything, it's probably gonna somehow end badly, because everything they're doing is so, we're just not sure this is the right thing to do. It's hard to tell if this is a criticism or a point about taste, in that it definitely was more fun last year. Last year it felt like it was a sort of a surreal, interesting superhero show, and this year it's a sort of become this surreal show about mental illness that happens to also have a Marvel character in it. I mean, if you're here for the surreal mental illness stuff, which I am, and it sounds like you are, then that's fine. I mean, this is, I guess, as someone who's a big fan of Twin Peaks, I guess I could see how this sort of surreal visual stuff might appeal to you.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up Twin Peaks. I think they wouldn't have gone as sort of surreal in the second series if Twin Peaks hadn't been like a big hit last year. I do think there was something in the way that the fact that we were able to bring back Twin Peaks, and the fact that it was very, very abstract and strange and sort of very much in David Lynch's style, and it was successful and people liked it, I think has given TV producers a bit more license to be like, well, let's do something a bit more offbeat, a bit stranger and a bit darker, and we know there's an audience out there for this. As you say, this series is much darker and also much stranger than the previous one.
Yeah, I think the sort of the sense that we're all just walking sort of constantly into shadows whilst watching this show, it did feel very. I don't know how much it was influenced by Twin Peaks to return. It definitely felt like it was, though. It felt a lot like a lot of the sort of the dark Agent Cooper stuff from Twin Peaks to return. Obviously, yeah, I'm sure people would tell me that very sternly that Twin Peaks has more strict artistic value than Legion, but I do think Legion has they've definitely seen Twin Peaks in the Legion offices.
Yeah. I mean, and it is a very, very unusual show, and very distinctive. But also, I think what works quite well is, at its core, it's got a relatively straightforward sort of superhero story. There's a villain, the Shadow King, as you said in the intro. He's searching for his body, his physical form. If he gets reunited with it, he might be so powerful he can destroy the world. And then there's people coming from the future to basically warn David and a few other characters about what's going to happen in the near future. In that sense, I think the plot at the core of Legion isn't too different to, say, the plot of like Deadpool 2. Just instead of dick jokes, it's got surrealism.
The actual plot of Legion is, as you say, it's a fairly standard sort of action superhero stuff. It's also, to be honest, not very dense. I mean, this is, in this series, even more so than last series, or season or whatever, they very much slowed down and stretched it out a bit. Like, this 11-episode season has a plot you could probably summarise in a not that long paragraph.
Yeah.
It's very much become, at this point, about the slowing down and the style and the, like, right, this episode we're going to concentrate on this character doing this thing.
Yeah.
And although I think towards the end of the season it gets a bit, okay, come on now. There's like about 3, I think, episodes towards the end of the season, which seems to be very slowly moving all the characters towards the final showdown. And there is a certain point where I started to really think, okay, come on, they're all going to the desert. I get it. Get them to the desert and then something can actually happen.
Yeah, you're right that there isn't an enormous amount of plot. But this is a show that's more about how the story is told than what the story that's being told is. I also think it's interesting that in like the last episode is probably one of the least surreal, the ones where they kind of dial back the abstract style, because in the last episode there is like a relatively large amount of plot to get through.
Yeah, that was the other reason it felt quite strange. The 2 or 3 episodes before the last one were very, very slowly moving people towards this showdown. And then once the showdown started at the beginning of the last episode, it basically fast-forwarded through about what could probably easily be at least 2 or 3 episodes of plot in about 50 minutes.
Yeah, it was sort of a bit more conventional in the end. I mean, the last episode did have a really cool sort of psychic battle with sort of the showdown between David and the Shadow King, or Amal Farouk, to use his given name. I think they did a really good job of showing, kind of this battle on, they didn't have an enormous amount of budget. We're talking TV budgets here, but, if you compare this to, I know, X-Men Apocalypse, which has a sort of psychic battle at the end. It's just people making sort of constipated faces, and then there's like some glowing light. This show, I think, did a lot more with a lot less. Yeah,
I can respect them willing to commit to big stylistic decisions, like having David and the Shadow King basically perform a music video at each other as they fight, for some reason.
Yeah.
As with a lot of things in Legion. Not sure why this is happening, but sure. John Hamm keeps showing up to give educational monologues about the nature of delusion. Sure, yeah. Okay. I could appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, he was very good, I thought, in the kind of, each episode they describe a different delusion. Obviously, building up to the point of this, which is to describe what it's like to be a psychopath, with the vague sort of implication that David either is or is becoming a psychopath because of his psychic abilities, I guess, are slowly eroding his ability to sense other people's individuality or other people's feelings and freedom.
I mean, it was more of a running plot thread in season 1 almost, that all the characters kept acting as if the reason David was acting strangely was because he'd been possessed by the Shadow King. But it seemed kind of, there was always a heavy undercurrent of, but what if he's actually just mentally ill? What if he's actually just not fully aware of what's going on?
Yeah.
And this season, they sort of ignored that for a bit and then brought it back quite heavily at the end as a sort of semi-twist.
Yeah, I thought what they were going with, which was quite interesting, was that, yes, David behaves strangely because he had the Shadow King in his head in the first series, but this is element of in the second series, which is, well, we've removed the Shadow King, but that doesn't automatically make everything all right. I mean, he's had a powerful, malevolent psychic force in his head since he was a child. It's left emotional and mental scars. Another thing I quite like about the show is that, there's quite a lot of TV or, especially in science fiction, it's like, God, this person's having something really, really terrible done to them, and then like, oh, we've resolved it, and now they're basically back to normal. Like, this show did a good job of showing kind of the lasting effect of trauma, even after the trauma itself's been overcome. I think there's an element of that. David probably deep down inside is a nice guy, but he's been horrifically mentally scarred, and also has like an enormous amount of power. So, what does that do to your psyche?
I mean, the incident I alluded to in the intro, wherein David basically, because he's scared his girlfriend is about to leave him, so in a moment of desperation, he sort of brainwashes her into staying with him. And then they sleep together while he sort of brainwashed her, and then she finds out and is quite upset, understandably, because that's really not great from a consent point of view. And yeah, it's not a sort of Kilgrave from Jessica Jones-esque premeditated serial run of abusing people, and it's clearly something he did because he was scared and upset, and because his emotions and his mind have taken a bit of a battering because of everything that's happened to him. But still not a great thing to do, all told.
No,
which I'm sure is something we'll be getting into next season.
Yeah, again, it's certainly manipulative. And also, it's interesting because if you're that powerful psychically, you can manipulate other people, and you can sort of even rewrite their personalities, or change how they perceive you, which is what David does. And yeah, and it does go into that, like, that's not consensual, and it's not right to use your powers to manipulate people in that way, which I thought was an interesting way of like exploring that, especially as they use it at the end to unend a lot of the kind of expected dynamics of a superhero show. You expect, the good guy, basically the eponymous character, to be the good guy, but in the end there's a sense of like, actually, was David the villain all along, or is he becoming a villain now that he's basically incredibly powerful but also really capable of completely manipulating people? And there's several times throughout the show that he does play with people's mindset and psychically manipulates them. Now you could argue that he had to do this because he was trying to defeat the villain Farouk, but also there's an element of like, it's still not consensual that he's playing with people's brains.
Yeah, I mean, the entire season was retrospectively building up to that, because he spends the last few episodes, he defeats the Shadow King by implanting his orders into other people's minds rather than telling them what he wants them to do, which apparently means the Shadow King doesn't realise until it's too late, which is very clever, but also, in retrospect, is building up to what he then does at the end of the season.
Yeah.
It again does leave the whole show a bit of a bummer, and if you were heavily invested in David as a heroic protagonist, like, I've read 2 reviews of the last episode. One of them has said basically what we're saying, which is, is David really a villain? That's an interesting direction to go in. And the other one seemed to feel really betrayed that they'd potentially turned David into a villain, and especially had him arguably sexually assault someone, which is a hard thing for your protagonist to come back from, all told.
Yeah, I mean, it depends how you are invested with the sort of premise of David being fundamentally a good guy. I think what they didn't do is reveal that actually deep down inside he's like a bad person. I think it's more, the show had interesting thing which was said that, like, well, David's probably a nice guy and he's motivated by essentially good aims, but he is traumatized and he struggles to relate to people and he's massively powerful, and those things don't always go together into positive outcomes, even if you have a sort of positive aims and ambitions. I thought that was an interesting thing to explore.
It's interesting. There was the slightly disturbing confrontation at the end of the season where people were trying to talk to David about what had happened, and he just kept saying, I'm a good person, I deserve love, which is something that I think Sid, his ex-girlfriend, had said to him in an earlier point in the show, which is the sort of thing you say to someone who's, struggling with mental health issues, but, it's the sort of mantra you can then cling to as, like, I'm a good person, I can do whatever I want. It becomes slightly disturbing in a strange way to hear him just saying it again and again in defence while people are saying, but David, here are not good things that you've done, which is, I guess, where you begin the idea of him possibly sliding into villainy.
Yeah, I think you've really hit the nail on the head there, in that David fundamentally believes he's a good person and he believes he deserves to be loved, and then he believes that because of this fundamental purity, every action he takes must therefore also be pure. And I think that's a really interesting thing to explore in a TV show, because all villains think they're the good guys in their own stories, certainly in real life, and people who do terrible things are often motivated by good aims or motivated by sort of insecurities or trauma that they've experienced. So that's something that the show really goes into. I mean, I think I don't have the actual data in front of me, but there is certainly, I think, some correlation between people who are abused going on to abuse other people later in life. And that's kind of what the show gets into, is that David has been abused a lot. He's also, like I say, powerful, so he has the ability to abuse other people, and this has naturally led to him abusing other people.
Yeah, and where this is going to go in the situation in which we have to, make another season of this serialised sort of superhero show with him as the protagonist, I don't know. I mean, as I say, I got a certain Empire Strikes Back feeling from this season, to the extent that I don't know if I can imagine next season being the last one quite easily. This does not feel like a show that needs to run forever. Part of me would be surprised if you get a lead in season 4.
They could wrap it up and it'd be just a sort of great 3-series, like, really interesting plot that's sort of, all wrapped up by the end of it. As you say, there's very much like Series 1 kind of established the characters and the dynamic. Series 2 has complicated them by changing it, like, do we think the villain is actually the villain and the hero is actually the hero? Then Series 3, I guess, will kind of gather everything together. Yeah, and then sort of resolve the tension. So I think they could be, a great sort of like trilogy, as you say. And this very much is The Empire Strikes Back. Yeah, and there's like other plot lines as well as David and his sort of struggles with his torment and his powers. Like there's some like really like just odd plot lines as well. Like there's this kind of psychic plague that's spreading across the world that just seems to lead to people just kind of standing vertically upright and chattering their teeth, and that's basically it. And I think there's a big sense that if they don't find a solution to this, eventually will consume the whole world, and humanity will just be a series of people standing there moving their jaw I don't know, this is supposed to be some kind of commentary on the internet where there's a lot of chatter, but no one's saying anything interesting, or has idiocy consumed the entire world, or if it's just a slightly sort of disturbing scene. Like there's a bit when they go to the sort of place where they're treating, or at least holding, the people who've been infected with the plague so far. It's just this enormous room filled with the sound of teeth chattering. And that's those moments like, well, that's quite an intensely disturbing scene. So yeah, and there's some implication that David is linked to this in some way, or it has some bearing on it, especially to do with the plotline of people coming from the future warning about this sort of thing. But it's not really resolved. So I think that'd be something, they'll hopefully pick up and resolve in Series 3.
Yeah, I liked the sort of ongoing series of plot gymnastics they seem to go through to keep the Aubrey Plaza character, Lenny, in the show.
Yeah.
Her storyline did arguably finish at the end of last season, but they're clearly aware that her sort of weird manic presence was a big part of the show's appeal, so there's a very concerted effort to almost write the show around keeping her in it.
Yeah.
To the extent that she literally, I guess we're doing full spoilers, so whatever, she literally scribbles over another character and takes their body, which was another quite disturbing bit, to be honest. The scene where it's revealed exactly how Aubrey Plaza has returned from the dead. Yeah,
that was quite a disturbing scene. I think the Audrey Plaza is brilliant, and she's really one of the best bits of the show, and I'm glad that she was in it. And as you say, they clearly recognise she was one of the best bits of Series 1. We've got to have her in Series 2, and the setup of Series 3 looks like it's going to have her in as well, maybe in a way that makes a little bit more plot sense.
And is arguably a bit incesty.
Yeah.
You got to hope the show will dig into that.
Yeah. Well, it's not a show that's afraid to go to dark places. Yeah, I mean, there's a really, really good cast of characters. I mean, Audrey Plaza is brilliant. Rachel Keller as sort of Sid, the main character's girlfriend, is very good. Dan Stevens playing Legion himself is excellent. Yeah, and also there's some quite unusual casting as from Flight of the Conchords.
Jermaine Clement. He's really good. He was probably better in season 1 when he was actually allowed to have fun, but he's quite good in this season as well.
Yeah.
They seem to have sort of maybe semi-written him out at the end, I'm not sure, but we'll see.
I guess it depends whether if the actor's available, because he's probably the most famous person in the whole show.
It's him or Aubrey Plaza. Dan Stevens might be more famous if you've seen Downton Abbey, which I haven't.
Yeah, Audrey Plaza's very good. She was in an independent science fiction film called Safety Not Guaranteed that I really liked. Playing quite a different character, but yeah, she's very good.
She was in Community, playing this sort of eye-rolly, sarcastic character, and I think there was a lot of commentary on lines of, does she just play that character in everything? Is she just playing herself? So, yeah, I don't know, maybe she went out looking for this sort of massive, over-the-top, not eye-rolling and sarcastic character she could play for Legion, I don't know.
Well, it shows that she's got range, yeah.
Yeah, the Sid character, the girlfriend character played by Rachel Keller, I thought they did a good job of giving her flashback episode and a bit more depth this season. She needed a bit of exploring, I think.
Yeah, she was more than just the love interest that she arguably was a bit in the previous series. I did really like the episode when they fill in her backstory. Usually I'm not a fan of these sort of, we're going to stop now and fill in history, or we're going to fill in backstory, or go on a diversion. It's often at the time it's like, you clearly don't have enough plot for the whole series, so you're going to detour around something we already know. But actually I thought it was brilliantly done, this story, filling in her whole story. And again, it had some quite disturbing bits, because obviously her ability, for those who haven't seen the show, is that she can sort of swap bodies with people. And there's one bit, when she's at school and she kind of swaps bodies with a bully and then makes the bully beat up some people so that the bully sort of gets arrested. But it is something quite disturbing about her ability to go sort of completely both-barreled violent at people. And again, this sort of plays this idea that, are these people really good, or does this enormous power, sort of open to being abused, even if your intentions are fundamentally good, like giving a bully his comeuppance, possibly the kind of extreme level of violence isn't necessarily good.
Well, yeah, if you're going to make a mature superhero show, I think, this is the sort of thing you kind of have to get into, the actual disturbing implications of these powers, or at least the more nuanced implications of these powers, rather than just, fighting, or just, not really examining the implications of it. So, yeah, I liked that episode. I also liked the slightly odd one where they filled in David's backstory alongside this sort of range of different versions of him that may or may not have existed. That was a bit weird, but quite enjoyable.
Yeah, that was, again, the sort of thing I ordinarily don't like. It was clearly just filler. I mean, it contributed nothing to the overall plot, but it was a nice sort of self-contained story, and it was interesting to watch.
It was meant to be about David's relationship with his sister, wasn't it? Because she was the only one who was in, all the bits.
Yeah.
Because it was placed just after they revealed what had happened to his sister, that she'd basically had her body stolen by the Aubrey Plaza character. So I think it was meant to be, a reminder that no matter what version David is in, his sister is one of the big emotional touchstones of his life. Now she's been killed or deleted or something, and oh dear, that's sad. That's what I took from it anyway.
Yeah, and it was a very good episode. So yeah, it did that really well. Yeah, I mean, the whole series is very strong. I mean, there's a lot of great episodes. It's full of all sorts of just really, really strange bit. Like, there's these sort of robots, the same actor playing this whole like army of robots. I know the characters are designed to certainly invoke the uncanny. I mean, there's also another character called Admiral Fukuyama, who's sort of a man who just wears a sort of wicker basket on his head.
Well, that was definitely the Legion officers have seen Twin Peaks moment, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was all quite surreal. I assume the fact the character is called Fukuyama is a reference to The End of History, which is a book that Francis Fukuyama wrote. And I guess because that character is tied up very much with the teeth-chattering plague plot line, I assume that from this you're supposed to suggest that, yeah, if the whole world is consumed by people who just chatter teeth and do nothing else, it would be the end of history. I assume what they're digging out there, but it certainly added to the overall surreal tone of the show.
Yeah, as you say, it's hard to tell whether that's coming back next season or whether it will just be quietly ignored. But yeah, no, I really like this. As I say, I felt there was a couple of bits in the last third of the season when they could maybe have tightened things down a bit. But yeah, overall I thought they did a lot of interesting things.
I really liked it as well, yeah, and I thought the visual style was brilliant and it was very distinct and interesting as a show. So if they do a third series, I really hope they keep up the distinctive visuals.
Yeah, well, they've got a third season, so whether it's the last one, I don't know. But yes, go Legion. Right, and now our supplementary question for this fortnight. How far can you twist your audience before they snap? And this, of course, is a vague reference to the big twist at the end of Legion Season 2, and more broadly, in reference, I guess, to that review I read and talked about during that Legion review, in that, if you do a big twist and reveal that this character isn't what they seem, or that this now hasn't happened, a segment of your audience will feel, betrayed, and, at what point do you just go, well, we're ploughing ahead in a day with good storytelling? And at what point does that become bad? I mean, a few weeks ago, there was the big DC Comics issue, Batman 50, came out, in which Batman was meant to get married. Spoilers. I'm going to have to spoil a lot of things doing this segment, I suspect. But the comic's will have been out for about a month by the time we do this. So hopefully that's okay. Batman did not, in fact, get married. The wedding was called off. And a lot of the audience felt betrayed. In The Last Jedi, they revealed Rey's parents were just regular people rather than any big secret or revelation. A large segment of the audience felt betrayed. Other examples, I'm sure there's some, they killed off a major character towards the end of Season 4 of Orange is the New Black. A large segment of the audience felt betrayed. How far can you twist your audience before they snap? Isn't it fun to just do big random plot twists? Alistair, what do you think?
Well, it's an interesting topic. I think twisting for twist's sake is usually a bad idea. If the twist isn't going to add anything to a plot or is just there to kind of overly complicate it, then that doesn't work, and your audience will probably get annoyed by it. I can think of one certain show, a show that I bring up a lot on the podcast and that I feel betrayed by because I invested a lot in it, which was Lost. And obviously Lost just kind of piled twist on top of twist. Sometimes, like there was just a twist in every episode purely just so they could have something weird to happen in the last 30 seconds of each episode. And after a while you got the sense like they're just really just throwing out a lot of stuff and seeing if they can make sense of it later. Yeah, I can understand an audience feeling betrayed. Yeah, I can understand how you could feel upset by the death in one of the recent series of Orange is the New Black, because there aren't many lesbian women of colour in television, and the fact that one of them got killed is, I can see how people find that upsetting. The fact they felt the need to kill that character.
It was a bit of a cheap death, that's what. I mean, I do kind of like what they've done with it in the aftermath, but the actual death itself was kind of cheap.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, very much so. And the Star Wars one, I'm less likely to show sympathy for, partly because I think quite a lot of the people who are objecting to The Last Jedi are manonist man-babies on Twitter who, for some reason, just dislike the fact that, like, Star Wars now has, people of colour and women in it. Did you see there was this, petition to remake The Last Jedi, which said that the current version of The Last Jedi pushes an agenda of masculine inferiority. So these are just clearly, again, manonist man-babies on the internet.
Yeah, metanism, yes. I mean, I'm not sure The Last Jedi is a perfect film. The more I think about it, the more I think, okay, that film has flaws. I think it's paced a bit weirdly and blah, blah, blah. Reviewer talk. But I don't think if it's a serialised type thing, which a lot of these things are, because to have the sort of audience investment that leads to the conversations we're talking about, they need to be often sort of long-running serialised things where you have a, established affinity to the characters. The question ultimately is of how far you want to twist the audience before they snap is the point where they bloody stop watching, or meaning or whatever. I mean, if people stopped watching Orange is the New Black because they were so upset about or annoyed about the death of Poussey, obviously, that arguably has not achieved the necessary goal. But then again, I mean, I'm definitely going to be back for season 3 of Legion to see what happens after the cliffhanger there. But then again, if some people aren't, maybe that hasn't achieved its goal either. But then again, I personally felt like that twist didn't feel cheap and did feel like a logical extension of what the show had been doing. It's the ideal sort of twist, really. It feels like it makes sense, but I also didn't see it coming.
Yeah, there's a sense that they're building up to it, and it works. They've laid the foundation, which I think is what makes a good twist and what makes you more likely to be able to twist without snapping the audience is there. You have to lay the foundation, you have to build up to it. A twist should sort of make sense, but also be unexpected. Twists that aren't unexpected, or twists that are expected, are not particularly interesting. Twists that don't make sense just confuse people. So yeah, and I think Legion, like I say, by sort of steadily building up to this twist, but also with our belief that, David's the good guy, we're on his side, he can't possibly turn out to be a bad guy, meant that it still was surprising in the end when he kind of disappeared over a moral precipice.
I don't know, a lot of this might just ultimately become, do I watch television in a slightly more, I am enjoying this in a detached, critical way, rather than actually getting invested in the characters and feeling betrayed when things happen to them. And, it's possible there's an element of that, fair enough. One of the big twists that actually did engender a feeling of, maybe not quite betrayal, but certainly a sense of, wow, you've really taken your own work and shat on it, was, I don't think you've seen this, so this might be a bit of a monologue, is the ending of How I Met Your Mother, which did kind of turn around and take a dump on at least about half of the show they just made, which is kind of bad. I mean, How I Met Your Mother, the premise is that the show is meant to be a long, rambling 8-year monologue by the lead character about how he met the mother of his children. And so the whole series becomes who is the mother, and then they introduce the mother, and it turns out not to be the mother. Yeah, I don't have the energy to recite it all. But if that was one of those twists that did not just make me think, well, that's stupid, but also, wow, that's so punishingly stupid that I've kind of retrospectively lost interest in the show as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, the audience was very unhappy with that twist. I mean, I didn't watch How I Met Your Mother, but I do remember when it finally ended and it was revealed, there was a lot of people going like, you what? And I think that is an example of what not to do. When you get to the point when your audience is actively rebelling at your twist and saying that was crap, yeah, you've gone too far.
Well, yeah, but then again, you've also... I mean, it always seems to become a case of which part of the audience you have respect for. I mean, Team We Hate The Last Jedi would probably say the same thing about a lot of the twists there. It's just that I don't agree with them, so...
Yeah, but I think it's also more difficult with How I Met Your Mother because it's like the last twist. Like, it's right at the end of a show, which means the show doesn't have anything to come back from after that. So it just leaves you with a sort of sour taste in the mouth. If the twist comes earlier, then there's still time for people to make it work with the show, such as Legion Series 2 twist, which I think does work, but also there's time in Series 3 for them to kind of make it fully part of the show.
Yeah, but I think if this had been the last season of Legion, and the ending of Season 2 had basically been, it's revealed that David has done all the stuff he did, and then rather than them cliffhangering out, he just goes, and now I shall destroy the world, snaps fingers, destroys world. I must admit, that would leave a bit of a bad taste in my mouth. That would make me think, you know what?
Yeah.
To be fair, maybe they could make it work. I do enjoy their style, but it seems like it wouldn't.
No, exactly. Which is why if you're going to have a twist right at the end, you need to make sure that it works well. I don't know. If you think of some classic twists from film history, yeah. Again, if you're chronically averse to spoilers to what might be several films by the end of this paragraph, then probably best to switch off now. But for example, I think Citizen Kane does a good job of the twist at the end. Is a good reveal for the film. It basically reveals a lot of the films about him searching for his lost childhood. That's why he is pining after Rosebud. Or, I don't know, in The Usual Suspects, when they reveal the identity of Kaiser Soze at the end, it makes the whole film make sense. Or, more accurately, it makes the whole film not make sense. And there's a sort of revelation that, yeah, this thing didn't really make sense, and there's a reason for that. It's all been manipulation from the start. Those twists work quite well. Then you get things like the work of M. Night Shyamalan, who feels that he must have a twist in every film. Some of them work quite well, such as the twist at the end of The Sixth Sense. Some of them are just sort of obvious or feel unnecessary. So if you get to the point when you feel like you have to twist.
He's a different example of how far can you twist your audience before they snap, in that he's more how often can you twist your audience before they snap, I guess.
Yeah.
It's like, if your brand is the twist, at what point does the twist stop being a surprise?
Yeah, exactly. And people try to figure out the twists, and then if the people try to figure out the twists and they're obvious. I think I went to see a film here in the cinema called, was it The Village?
That one did happen, yeah.
Yeah, about this sort of, well, you think it's a sort of medieval village, but actually the revelation is it's set present day. And It's quite obvious. I was expecting a twist, and I sort of successfully worked out exactly what the twist would be.
A couple of other podcasts I listen to have tentatively seemed to be coming back around to M. Night Shyamalan because they seem to quite like that film Split he did, and they're now quite excited for this film Glass, where the character from Split meets the character from Unbreakable.
Yeah.
Has he got better, or do people just like it because he's doing a shared universe? Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he has made some of the worst movies I've ever sat through, including The Last Airbender and After Earth.
Oh god, I forgot that was him.
Yeah.
I'm quite intrigued by the notion of this sort of Unbreakable semi-sequel, I will admit, even if I am kind of reluctant to get too invested in an M. Night Shyamalan film.
Unbreakable is a film that the twist works well in that, and again, here comes some spoilers for Unbreakable. When it does a similar thing to Legion, when it reveals that the mentor figure, the person you think is a good guy, is revealed at the end to be, a bad guy. And so, he's been manipulating people and sort of sowing chaos. And that's a good twist because it makes sense and, kind of adds something to the plot. Some of his twists are just unnecessary and feel like, he has to do a twist.
Yeah, and I have not seen Split, although, yes, as I say, the fact that a couple of podcasts I vaguely respect have recommended it have made me consider it. But there's a part of me that's tempted to go and see it just so I can be down with this Unbreakable sequel. Who knows if I'll manage it.
Yeah.
But, I don't know, I mean, a lot of the time, because I always sympathise with the role of the writer, if the story hasn't finished yet, I'm always a bit sort of, let the story play out, guys, it's just a midway twist along the way, let's see what happens. Like, this Batman wedding storyline is in issue 50 of what has been widely advertised as a 100-part run. That's quite a long run, isn't it?
Yeah.
And therefore, he's clearly going somewhere with it, but, I guess if you're a long-time Batman fan and, what you want isn't a 100-issue twisty monolith of a story, what you want is to see Batman and Catwoman get a flat together and raise kittens, then I guess, your dreams have been dashed anyway, and whether the writer has some clever plans for his last 50 issues is kind of irrelevant.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right that you should let the twist play out and see how it goes, especially if something's advertised to be 100 issues, you're only halfway through. You've got to have faith that the writer knows what they're doing, unless you think, this is just a twist too far, and the writer is just, toying with you, or you get a sense they don't actually know where they're going with this, they just kind of make it up as they go along, and there is no master plan, then that's the sort of thing that can really lose you an audience.
Yeah, I was talking about Westworld with Julianne last season, and that's a show which is constantly, as I said in time, very much rimming the bumhole of conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
I don't think it's fallen into it yet, personally, but the extent to which it is just built on falling deeper down this chasm of reveals, I don't know where they're going to finish it, to be honest. I don't quite know. To spoil it as little as possible, they have opened it up a bit and given themselves a bit more space to play in future seasons, but nonetheless, it's shows like that. I mean, I enjoyed Orphan Black quite a lot, but I didn't feel like the final season entirely paid it all off and made me think they totally made everything make sense and made it worth it. I felt like the final season was a smidge disappointing. So, that's the risk of pivoting everything on your big twist, I suppose.
Yeah, that was another show that had a lot of twists and sort of really went into there must be a twist in each season finale and things like that. Some of them worked and some of them didn't. I guess it's a difficult thing when you've got a show that's about a conspiracy, in that there must obviously be revelations as part of having a conspiracy show. But if it runs for too long, the fact that by necessity you have to keep revealing things eventually gets to the point where it's going to be confusing. They just kind of twist on top of twist, because they have to twist if it's a conspiracy. But if it goes on too long, it becomes unbelievable.
It's weird. I mean, not to go too far into reviewing Orphan Black, but that was a show which, because it was a conspiracy show, it kept having to do these conspiracy and these twists. But was anyone watching it for the conspiracy and the twists? Wasn't basically everyone watching it for the character banter?
Yeah, pretty much.
I watched Orphan Black for the chat between the sisters on the ridiculous chameleonic acting from Tatiana Maslany. I didn't watch it for discovering who the real benefactor behind the mysterious corporation owned by yet another mysterious corporation is.
Yeah, which ultimately ends up with a magical island. Why does it always come back to magical islands?
It upsets me that our biggest running joke / reference point on this podcast is your disappointment with Lost. I mean, it's my fault for picking this question, I suppose, and therefore inevitably bringing it up again, but still.
I think Orphan Black did handle their twists well. I think it's just an unfortunate part of the nature of the show that they had to keep twisting, and I think
They had 5 years worth of banter, but not 5 years worth of twists.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much it in a nutshell, yeah. Yeah, or 24 is another one that obviously, being a conspiracy-based show, is rooted on there must always be a twist. There must always be a guy behind the guy and then a guy behind that guy. And after a while, you got to the point when it's I've just ceased to believe this is credible at all. The incredibly complex nature of these conspiracies really pushes the boundaries of believability. But also, there's the fact that because every series takes place in one day, not only is there an incredibly complex web of conspiracies, but for some reason, all operating in the same 24-hour period, and then all being revealed and resolved in the same 24-hour period. So I guess the premise of the show, by its nature, sort of stretched credibility.
Yeah, I watched one season, then got bored.
Well, you watched the first one, which is the one that's quite good, so...
Okay. If that bored me, then I'm glad I didn't watch the following 12 seasons then.
Yeah, they just get increasing levels of why is this happening, especially why is this happening in 24 hours. Maybe you should always take a break and do tomorrow. There's absolutely no reason why you have to do these like huge numbers of things. And also it gets ridiculous that, I don't know, there's one series when in like the first kind of plot line is the villains try to melt down every nuclear reactor in America, and that's all kind of resolved after the first few hours. And then it moves on to like 3 or 4 other plot threads. And it really makes you think, it's the afternoon that, America was nearly reduced to nuclear slag only a few hours ago, and everyone basically seems to be fine. Yeah, there's another one when they blow up Los Angeles with a nuclear explosion, and a couple of hours later it's basically fine.
Anyway, yeah, I feel like we're on the verge of twisting our audience till they snap. As we get, we spend more and more time living with things like angry Last Jedi hate fans, whatever. I always find it a bit weird calculating this whole, at what point is audience betrayal good or bad? I mean, ultimately, what I'm talking about there is probably less how much can the writer twist the audience and more how much can the audience be entitled dicks about it. Maybe that's another question. It's not entirely on the writer to placate the audience. There is also a sense of, yes, you're allowed to say, I don't like this twist, I'm going to stop watching. No, I don't think anyone will actually care if the segments of people who were appalled by The Last Jedi don't go and see episode 9. But if they continue to be such dicks about it on the internet, that's annoying.
Yeah, and there's also the factor that people who quite like things generally are just sort of quietly sit there and go, I like that. People who are angry about things sort of get up on the top of their chair and start screaming and jumping up and down and sort of do the equivalent of that on Twitter. So it's kind of weird. It's like a few very vocal, disappointed people can sometimes seem like a bigger deal than a larger group of people who are contented. And I'm not saying there are more people who are happy with The Last Jedi than are unhappy with it. I mean, it'd be hard to resolve that. But I do think sometimes you have to be aware that the squeaky wheel gets the grease, sort of situation. And there are some very squeaky wheels on The Last Jedi.
Yeah, I think it's, as I think I said at the time, something slightly shonky about it. I still enjoyed it, but I don't know. It made the mistake of showing weakness, and unfortunately, I think there were some people who were ready to fully hate on it. But anyway, yeah. we will return to Star Wars, I'm sure, in 15 months or whatever it is when Episode 9 comes out. And at that point, we will see whether Star Wars can manage to twist its audience back into place.
I think overall with twists, I would say that, yeah, if they're thought through, built up to you properly, and worked out well, then they work and your audience will be on board with them. The Legion is a good example that it was really well planned and well built up to, and took the audience with it. Twisting for twist's sake won't take your audience with you. So it's important that a twist be unexpected, but it's also that a twist be sort of founded in the reality of a show or story.
Yeah, I mean, Legion was, to be fair, shedding viewers quite heavily during its second season. Like, there was, to some people, I think the fact that it got renewed for a third one was a surprise. But obviously the twist didn't happen till the very end, so I would perhaps attribute that more to the fact it just wasn't as much fun than the fact that it had a slightly grim twist at the end. But who knows? Yeah,
and I also think the fact that they really pushed the surrealism in the second series much more than the first series. I don't know if more audiences were alienated just by how odd the show was rather than the twist.
But that's very much what you're after, obviously.
Yeah, that's what I want. That's why I like the second series a lot. It brought more of what I liked from the first series. But I can see how if people were basically there for the X-Men story and weren't into this sort of like surreal mental health mindscape stuff, they might have been put off by the second series because there was a lot more of that. That's all we have time for. If you have enjoyed this episode of Moderate Fantasy Violence, then please leave us a review on iTunes or in your podcatcher of choice so that others can find out about the show. You can also visit our website, moderatefantasyviolence.com, where you can listen to back episodes of the show, bonus audio content, and brief written pieces by Nick and myself.
And you can also follow us on social media at MFV Podcast on Twitter, or by searching Moderate Fantasy Violence on Facebook. Or I think you could just search it on Twitter as well. And I believe young hero Alistair Ball is attempting to post a bit more opinion news content on the Twitter and the Facebook, so do go and check those out and engage with him. He enjoys it, honest.
I do.
He does. It's true. I've been Nick Bryan. You can find me on the internet at nickbryan.com, where there are some free comics I've written, as well as the Hobson and Shaw books I've also written. I've also got a zine thing I've made, a sort of print edition of some comics, which I'm hoping to have on sale from the website by the time this goes up. I'll delete this from the podcast if not. Yeah, check those out. You can also follow me on Twitter as @NickMB.
I've been Alistair Ball. You can follow me on Twitter at AlistairJRBall, or find more of my writing at redtrainblog.com. Thanks for listening. Next time, we'll be reviewing the final Marvel film of 2018, and that's Ant-Man and the Wasp. See you then. Goodbye.
Bye.
But I don't know. I think Origin New Black handled it. I just did it again, didn't I?
Yes, the old Orphan is the new black.
You know,
Speak.